Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us, Second Story Press at Edelweiss Book Fest. We're really excited to be doing this virtual show. My name's Bronte. I'm the sales coordinator at Second Story, and today we're doing our first of two Ask an Editor interview/conversations. And today we're speaking with our managing editor, Gillian Rodgerson. Gillian's had a long career in journalism and publishing in Canada and the UK. And before joining Second Story, she was a senior editor at Insomniac Press, editor-in-chief of Capital Gay newspaper and Diva magazine in London, and the co-founder of Diva Books. And she joined Second Story last year, 2020. Hi, Gillian.
Hi.
Thanks for agreeing to do this interview. I know editors are stereotypically more introverted types.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Okay, so I figured we might as well start off with hearing how you got into publishing and more specifically into editing. So can you tell us about that?
Sure. I started at the Body Politic newspaper, which was Canada's gay liberation newspaper in the 70s and 80s. And I started there in the early 80s. And what I learned there, as well as writing and editing, was how to be edited. And I think that that's an important thing for editors to know about. The Body Politic, as some of you might know, was run by a collective, and we collaborated on most things. So what would happen was you'd write a news story or a feature, and it would be passed around the other members of the collective with a comment sheet on the front. So you had to be able to take pretty pointed criticism of your writing, your political views, your word choice, whatever. And then you would work with an editor to bring the story up to what you wanted it to be, what everybody else wanted it to be. So very early on, I learned how to collaborate, and I learned how to not be too precious about things I'd written, but I also learned how it feels to have someone else look at something you've spent hours and hours working on and say, this isn't right. This needs to do this. You've missed the point here. So I guess you learn to be gentle, to respect what someone else has done with their work. And I think, I mean, that was just with news stories and magazine features. With a book, someone could have spent years of their life on it. And as their editor, they're trusting you with, their word baby. So it's really important that you understand that you respect them and their work enough to be really honest, but also that you respect them and their work enough to express what you have to say in a way that they can hear it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you started in news, and then when did you make the move over to books and literature, as it were?
Well, at the Body Politic, I did news, features, reviews, a lot of international news. And then when I moved to England in 1987, I thought, oh my God, I'm so burned out. I'm never I was 27 years old, but I was burned out. I'm never going to write another word. I'm going to be a typesetter. And I found a job as a typesetter on Gay Times magazine. And I lasted doing production, I think, for about 3 months. And then they asked me if I wanted to interview Cheryl Crane, Lana Turner's daughter, who had been accused of murdering her stepfather and had a new book out. So I wasn't going to turn that down. So then I went off and did that interview and wrote the feature. And I also had, because I had done a lot of international news reporting at the Body Politic, when the international news writer at Gay Times went on holiday, I would fill in for him. And then eventually he went off on sick leave and didn't survive. And I took over the international news desk from Mick Belston. who taught me a tremendous amount. And yeah, I mean, I've been so lucky to have worked with people who were really good at what they did and who were really generous with sharing what they knew. So at the Body Politic, I learned so much from Tim McCaskill, from Chris Birchall, from Rick Bebu, Gerald Hannon, Ed Jackson. I'm probably forgetting people, but all those people who wrote and edited and lived those politics and were so generous with people like me who were just coming into the paper and wanting to be involved. And the same thing at Gay Times. And so I was writing, and I was still the typesetter as well, which gave me a tremendous appreciation for the production department, I have to say.
Yeah.
And so I've always tried to remember that when it comes to deadlines and the state of copy you hand in and things like that. And then eventually Capital Gay, which was a weekly free newspaper in London, was looking for an editor. And they decided after, God, I think they've been going for 10 years, maybe longer than that. I've forgotten now. But they decided that they wanted a woman editor. So I was her. So I did that job, I think, for 3 years. And I loved it. It was great. It was like a funny bar rag in some ways, but with really good news values. I had just amazing, an amazing couple of news reporters. So yeah, and then Diva magazine came along, and I was not the founding editor of the magazine. That was a woman called Frances Williams. And Diva was published by the same company that had published Gay Times. And Frances had the idea that we could do a lesbian magazine. And then when she moved on, I applied for the job, and they let me do it. And I was there for 7 years. And while I was there, they had some book imprints. And so we decided that it would be good to have a lesbian book imprint as well.
That is such a journey to where you are now. Like, I mean, myself, you know, working with you at Second Story and knowing what we publish, I would never have guessed at the breadth of stuff that you have done across the spectrum to bring you to here, putting out, you know, beautiful picture books and, you know, really interesting YA and memoirs and all sorts of different content. That's really fascinating.
I've been lucky.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, my next question is, what's your favorite part of being an editor? And I guess with your background now doing the kind of work that you do at Second Story, like, what in particular do you enjoy about doing it?
What I love about editing, and I think it doesn't really matter so much what the material is that you're editing, although different things have different joys to them. But I think the thing that I still get really excited about is working with writers and working with them to make their book or their story exactly what they want it to be, to help them. It's not my book, you know, my name's not on it. My job as an editor is to really help them find their voice or refine their voice or make sure that they are saying exactly what it is they want to be saying to the community that they want to reach. And that's what I love. And when I was a freelance editor, I worked with a lot of emerging writers, and some people kind of say, oh, you know, it's so much work, and oh, they might not ever get published. But there's so much joy in that too, because someone who's so excited about their work, and they're so excited about what they've written, and working with them to really, really get it to what they want it to be and what it can be is fantastic. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, it must be very fulfilling. It's definitely a thrill for all of us, I think, when we see the finished product and you know all the work that's gone into it and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Awesome. We're calling this segment Ask an Editor. So just by the way, if anyone has questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. Questions about editing, about what Gillian's done in her past, anything. And like, why don't we move to talking about the industry? You mentioned about writers, up and coming writers, maybe having trouble getting into the industry, things like that. So publishing is constantly evolving, as we all know. What gets published, how it's received, how we treat books that we put out there, constantly shifting and changing. Are there any recent shifts that you have noticed that you're excited about, or maybe ones that you're hoping we can move past? Anything there?
I think there have always been amazing books by amazing writers that deserved a huge audience. And I think that perhaps there's more respect for a wider range of stories. And also the other thing is not just the stories. I think, diversity in books and things was something that was adopted by quite a few progressive publishers early on. But what I find more interesting and exciting and valuable is that it's not just the books that are being published. And I'm optimistic, and I'm also a realist. I know it's probably going to take a little while, but I hope that the people that are choosing publishing as a career, choosing publishing as their life project, I hope there are more different kinds of people who are coming into the industry, not just as writers, but as editors, as publicists, as agents, as marketing people, because all those perspectives all come together to make, each book project what it is. And I think until the industry, I think a lot of people will have noticed that editing in particular seems to be something that is mostly done by women. I don't know why, but it is. Salaries in publishing and editorial are perhaps, depending on where you work, are not as high as you might be able to get in some other sector. And so I think we have to be aware that in some ways, up till, working in publishing in some ways is a bit of a luxury, because you have to have been able to afford access to education. You have to have been able to afford to read widely. You have to have the free time to read, to be able to go to book events, all those kinds of things that perhaps people in publishing don't necessarily think about what you have to do to get to that point. What you have to do to have the mental leisure, if you will, to be able to concentrate on reading and all those things. And I'm really encouraged that more people are seeing publishing as something that's possible for them. And I really, really hope that continues even more widely, because that's really important to me. And that's the way that publishing is going to get, better, broader, have a bigger range of exciting ideas and perspectives and stories and all those things is, because it's one thing for, let's face it, for white middle class people like me to sit here and say, I want a bigger range of stories. I want all this, but I hope that I'm humble enough to realize that I can't necessarily be the one who's funneling all those stories into the world. That publishing has to be like much broader and many, many more kinds of people telling telling their stories, telling other people's stories that they found, and just making that conversation louder and including and more inclusive.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a great point, that even if we have all the diverse stories in the world to publish, if the writers are writing them, the industry as a whole needs to reflect that diversity as well in order to bring them out with respect and knowledge. Yeah.
And just, I mean, it's not even, I think, it could be possible, but it's just also working in publishing is a lot of fun. I want more people to be able to do it.
Yeah.
It's given me so much.
Yeah.
I want other people to have that fun and that joy.
For sure. Yeah. That leads me kind of into a nice question in terms of publishing being fun. I think that there's a lot of people who don't really know what publishing is actually like. Working in publishing, being an editor, it's very sort of, people think of it as a dreamlike job, we see women walking around in beautiful outfits and they're like sleek publishing houses in the movies. But, what do you think are some misconceptions about editing, about writing? If people are here and are thinking, oh, that could be kind of interesting for me to work in publishing or publishing adjacent, like, what do you want them to know?
When I'm sitting here in my fuzzy socks trying to keep my cat off the keyboard and wrestling with what I'm going to say to an author who perhaps, is blowing deadlines or things like that. I mean, the glamour never ends. Just like Jackie Onassis at Simon & Schuster, that's me.
Yes.
No, what are some of the misconceptions? Some of the things are true. Girls in interesting glasses.
True.
But I guess maybe I don't know, because some of the, when I thought of being a book editor, I thought my dream job was spending the day reading. And, I used to try and do that in school under my desk, even in math class. So a lot of the things are true, but perhaps the idea that everybody in publishing is kind of snobby and well-groomed and extraordinarily well-read in a particular literary canon, all those kinds of things that, we can help an editor, blast out a well-crafted sentence just with a flick of our manicured fingernail. But it's hard. It's work.
Yes.
It's hard work.
Yeah.
It's a lot of, a lot of it is thinking. I don't move from my desk as often as I ought to. And I don't know. I mean, what other stereotypes are there? Some of them are true.
Yeah. I mean, well, that's kind of good to know in a way, that the things that people think of are actually applicable. All the attention to detail and the hours spent reading, for sure.
That is one thing. Okay. That editors are fussy and picky and pedantic, and that editing is a game of gotcha, and that and that's so far from the truth. I mean, I think one of the best pieces of editing advice that I ever had was from a woman called Rebecca Vogan, who was my copy editing instructor. And she said, don't be a smarty pants. This is what she told the class. Don't be a smarty pants. And by that, she meant don't go looking for ways to embarrass an author with their mistakes. Don't assume that you know something. Always look it up. I still always look up how to spell the word stomach because I don't. I can't keep it in my head.
We all have those words.
And I think what she was really saying is be generous, be kind, because all those things are so important. And you're not out to get somebody with your knowledge of grammar. I mean, you can acquire a knowledge of grammar. You know, it doesn't make you a better person just because you don't split infinitives. It doesn't make you a better person because you can figure out how to use a subjunctive. It's the stuff that you learn.
Yeah.
And there's no kind of moral high ground in it. It's just, it's a tool. It's the same as, you know, I bake a lot. I just recently got a stand mixer. It's a great tool. It's made my baking better. It's the same with, you know, getting a good grip of grammar will make your editing better.
Yeah. And I mean, like, speaking of challenges and how you approach books, and given that we had spoken about diversity, I am very interested in hearing about the measures that you take as an editor if you are trying to bring more diverse stories into the world, written by people who have a different background, maybe ability, identity than you. Are there things that you do in particular to work in those situations?
I think one thing that's really important to us at Second Story is that we accept unsolicited manuscripts. You know, anybody can send us their manuscript and we'll look at it. We won't necessarily be able to give detailed feedback because we do get a lot of manuscripts, a lot. And if we gave every story a detailed breakdown of why it might not be right for us and things like that, we would do nothing but do that. And in some ways that would be a nice way to spend one's life. But but we accept manuscripts from people who don't have agents. And that's good because agents are wonderful, and agents will, you know, they know the press, they know, you know, I have friends who are agents who I respect tremendously. But agents are another level of, as they say, gatekeeper. So it just mediates that work through one more person. And so that's one thing that we do, is that we're really open in our submission process. And I think for writers though, one thing I would say to writers who are hoping to get published and who might not have, you know, traditional stories to tell and things like that, is it's so important before you submit to a press to do your part, do a little bit of research, find presses that publish writers that you like and respect, find a press that has a kind of list that you feel that you would fit on, and submit to those presses. I mean, some writers will say, oh, you know, I had 60 rejection letters and then I finally got published, and you can too. But I would bet you that 25 of those rejection letters were from presses that weren't right for the book, that the book was not good necessarily. But if you've written, you know, a book of poems about surviving trauma, Harlequin Press is probably not going to be the right press.
Right.
And that's really important as well. So if a writer has taken the time to see what we do and to see that they think that their book would fit with our general ethos, then I'm totally happy to look at it and give them, you know, sorry, this isn't right for us this time, or maybe a little bit of, you know, this is why, if you wanted to resubmit, you could do this. So that's one thing. And then as an editor, as I keep saying, editing is a conversation. And I hope as an editor that I listen as much as I talk, and I listen to hear what the writer actually wants to say. I ask them, if I don't know something, I don't assume that my way is right. I ask them to tell me their story, to tell me why it's important to them to say this in this way. And I also try and research and read and listen. And
Yeah.
I think, so, I mean, I also, as a managing editor, I want to match the right editor with the right story too. So I don't edit all the books.
Right. Yes.
Much as I like to be selfish and do the best I can.
Well, that's an important distinction between a managing editor and, I guess, just an editor. So as part of your job as a managing editor, you delegate the books to freelance.
An editor is kind of like a midwife, and a managing editor is kind of like an air traffic controller. So
okay.
That's if you think about those things, like the editor helps the book come into the world, and whereas the managing editor is kind of out there figuring out, okay, I've got this book coming in at this time, and it needs this illustrator and this proofreader and this copy editor, and this book's coming in. So that's a lot of my work is organizing and scheduling.
And when you do get
commissioning.
Right. Yes. And when you do get to put on your editor's hat, what are the books that you most enjoy working on?
That would be like admitting to having a favorite child. I only have one child, so it's easy. I can say I have a favorite child because I only have one. But as far as books go, there are books that I've edited that I've found a real connection maybe with the writer, or that I've learned new things from working on the book.
You don't have to name names. I mean, we can just talk about a category. Like, do you enjoy editing memoirs? Do you enjoy editing?
I enjoy editing memoirs because I'm nosy. I like hearing about other people's lives.
Fair enough.
I like that. I like knowing about other people. I like hearing their stories. I like learning about what made them who they are. I like a good novel. In my own reading life, I read memoirs. I read literary fiction. I also read like cozy murder mysteries.
Oh, very nice. Kill two birds with one stone, I suppose. Right?
But one of my favorite books I ever worked on was a book of short stories by Jamaican-Canadian writer called Pamela Mordecai, and it's called Pink Icing and Other Stories. And I think it was a book that I acquired at Insomniac, and Pam and I became friends, and I learned so much from her when I was working on that book. And that, I think, it made me a better editor in some ways. When I say all these things about not assuming you know things and asking questions, and because she was writing about Jamaican culture, which she was immersed in, and I am not. But by talking to her and listening to her and she's very knowledgeable about Jamaican Creole. And listening to her talk about language and how she wants to use language, and working out with her where it would work to have the Creole in the story, and where perhaps we could invite non-Jamaican readers in by using perhaps less specific Creole in places, and where it was really important. And I learned huge amounts from her.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I mean, I love hearing that it's such a two-way street, between editors and authors.
I really believe that it is. That's so. It's very important to me that editing is seen as a conversation. And you have to know, when you work with a writer, what kind of editor is best for them. Some writers want an editor who's going to, lay down the law and give them tough deadlines and be really strict with them. And others want somebody who's going to be their cheerleader and it's going to, you're doing great, keep going, and things like that. So it kind of different writers need different kinds of editing too.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. Wow. I love talking to you guys in editorial about this stuff, because like many people, I entered the publishing industry with a golden idea of I'm going to be an editor, and then found that it wasn't for me. But, speaking to editors, it just makes me so excited about all the work that you guys do, and all the potential for future books to come out. It's very inspiring to hear it all. Okay, I think we can close out. I would love, oh gosh, I see that we have a question that I totally did not see before. Okay, I'll just put this in and then we can close out with this, because this is kind of a fun, technical question. What kind of programs do you use to keep the production schedule organized? I love that.
Okay, we use Excel. And we have a spreadsheet of the titles for each season, who's doing them, what their interim deadlines are, when things have to come in. And I have to say, my colleague Jordan Ryder, who's our editorial coordinator, is a spreadsheet queen. She's so good at all this. And so when, if we see a deadline's coming up and we need to, it's my job to either encourage or crack down, depending. Yeah. I try to, excuse me, I try to gently encourage more than I crack down. But sometimes, you just have to say, okay, look, step away from the keyboard and hand it over and get from here. One time, not me, but I do know an editor who one time had to go to the author's house and physically take the manuscript from his hands and put it in his car and drive it back to the office.
Oh my gosh.
This was before, electronic submission.
Yeah, I don't know how you would go about doing that these days. I don't know. I'm sure someone knows a way. That's funny. It's a real good cop, bad cop choice every time, eh? Yeah.
Yes. I don't drive, but if I have to, I can find you on the bus. No, but we use a lot of spreadsheets. I keep a lot of lists every day. When I sit down at my desk, the first thing I do is I go over the list I've made the day before about, okay, this is what needs to be done today. I add to it. I do cheat. Sometimes I write something on the list I've already done so that I can tick it off and feel good.
We all do.
But I'm a big believer in lists. I keep a notebook beside me all the time to remind myself, you need to write to so-and-so, you need to think. I have draft emails that I'll work on for a couple of days if it's something that I really need to know how to say. Mm-hmm. So a lot of lists, a lot of spreadsheets.
Wonderful. And the aforementioned Jordan will be with us tomorrow, so we can dig a little deeper into her spreadsheet prowess. But thank you so much, Gillian. And if people want to reach you, I believe they can email you, Gillian@secondstorypress.ca. And if you are interested in submitting to Second Story, the submission guidelines are all on our website.
Yeah. I'd love to hear from you. Absolutely.
We would love to hear from you. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Gillian. And thank you, everyone who listened in. And have fun at Edelweiss. And join us back here tomorrow at 11:30 Eastern Time to hear from Jordan.
Thanks, Bronte. That was fun.
Yeah, it sure was.
Back to work now.
Back to work.